Hello and welcome to Little African News. My name is Mona Davids and I am the founder and publisher of Little African News, New York Voice News, as well as the host of Real Talk with Mona Davids on YouTube. I want to thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited as a mom, as a parent, about today's interview with Eric Grannis, who is the executive director of Strive Charter School that's opening in the Bronx very soon. And just as a mom, all I can say is that I wish there was such a school when my kids were in school. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome Eric to Little African News. Thank you so much for joining us today. And, please tell our viewers a little bit about yourself, and then let's talk about Strive.
So, Mona, thanks for inviting me and the opportunity to talk to your viewers and all the support, by the way, you've given to charters and other things over, 20 years we've known each other. So Strive, so I've been largely volunteering in the charter school sector for the last quarter century. The day after the charter school law was passed, I volunteered my services because I believe profoundly in school choice, and then I've done a lot of work in the sector over the years. And a few years ago, we sent the last of our three. My wife and I sent the last of our three children off to school, and we actually then ended up writing a book together called the A+ Parenting, and it was about our own experience as parents. And that led me to think about what we had done right for our children, because they've all been quite academically successful. And it, by the way, wasn't at all difficult or unpleasant. It was a very good experience for my wife and I. We really enjoyed parenting. And so, when I read, like, for example, is it Tiger Mom? Is that the name of the?
Yes.
Tiger Parenting. I was like a little horrified because I was like, oh, this seems very unpleasant. Why would you want to do all that? Couldn't you have fun? And so I thought about, like, a lot of what I believed was that our kids had a lot of great experiences outside of school hours. And as you think about a child and their education, 80% of their waking hours per year are spent outside of the school. So surprise, surprise, that matters, right? And even if you take two kids and you give them an equally good education in the 20% of the time that they spend in school, if their experiences and their educational enrichment in the remaining 80% of the time is quite different, they are probably not going to end up in the same space. So I decided to create a school that would address that, and frankly, that also would address the challenges of being a parent in this modern age, where everyone is working hard. There's not the kind of woman who stays at home and can be there when the bus arrives, as it was in the 1950s, right? My wife and I were, reasonably affluent, not rich by any means, but affluent enough that we could hire babysitters to pick our kids up and ensure that they were spending their time valuably. But that's not something everyone can do. So combining these two ideas of making parents' lives easier and helping kids have a more enriching educational experience outside of school hours and not just spending all their time with the electronic babysitters, otherwise known as smartphones. I said, what if we could extend the hours? And I said, what about if we could, go to 7 p.m.? Could we even do something on the weekend? And I really looked closely at the finances and how you could structure it to be more efficient and flexible. And I finally ended up at something that, to my knowledge, has never been done before in this nation or anywhere that I know, although it's probably been done somewhere, but certainly not in the United States. Just to have a school with flexible hours. So we have a 9 to 4:30 school day during the, fairly ordinary school year, 186 days, 188 days a year, which is about 6-7 more than the New York City Department of Education. But importantly, outside of that, our school has flexible hours and is open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 days a week, year round. So essentially, you can think of it as being like a Starbucks. We are always there, except for a couple of weeks of vacation a year between semesters and a few holidays here and there. But with those very limited exceptions, we're there. And a parent, as long as they send their kids, obviously, to the required school hours, it's very flexible. On any given Saturday, you could come at 7, 8, 9, 10. You can pick up your child whenever you want, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. You don't have to tell us. You don't have to schedule it, right? You just have to show up. And the idea is that you make the parents' lives easier, but also because you're making the parents' lives easier, you're making it more likely that they will be able to bring their kids in, and therefore more likely that we will get to spend more time with them in our optional hours, which are enriching, although they're not traditional school, but they're enriching.
Wow. Wow.
And we've obviously, not surprisingly, we found a lot of interest in this. And frankly, it's actually hard to explain to people. Some people are like, oh, well, 7 to 7 is too long for my kid. And I'm like, no, you don't need to be here from 7 to 7. You could be here from 9 to 4:30 or 9 to 7 or 7 to 4:30, whenever you want. And people just find it hard to wrap their minds around this idea because they're so used to the idea of a conventional school where all the kids show up at the same time, all the teachers are there at the same time, everybody leaves at the same time, whereas we have this radically different, more flexible, approach to make lives easier. Another interesting thing about flexibility is so many parents want busing, but because it makes their lives easy, they don't have to come to the school. Now, I was talking to a parent just yesterday, and she was saying, well, could you pick up my kid at one location and drop them off at another? And I'm like, sure, we're a charter school. We can do whatever you want, right? We're flexible, right? And she says, okay, well, yeah, because I'd like to go on this side of the Bronx, pick up, and this side of the Bronx to drop off. And I'm like, okay, and which bus time would you like? And she's like, what? What do you mean, what bus time? I'm like, well, you have a choice. I said, we have a bus that arrives at 7:15, and we have a bus that arrives at 8:30 because some parents want to drop their kids off at the second time. And on the back end, I said, we have a bus that leaves our school at 7:15 after the kids get a snack. Or you can have a bus that leaves the school around 6:30 after your child has dinner. And by the way, every day that we are open, which is something like, over 300 days a year, we serve free breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Okay, so then the woman says, the woman says, wait, so we were talking about this. So she's like, well, wait, when's that second bus going to come again? I said, well, it's going to come to you around 6:45, 7 o'clock. She says, oh, in that case, I don't need to send him to two locations because the whole thing I was going to do is I was going to have my mother. I'm not available to be home when my son comes home. So I was going to have him being picked up by my mother, and then my mother was going to bring him over to my home. But now that you're telling me that the bus is going to arrive at 7, I don't need to do all that work. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that's really trying to make it easier. And one of the things I've noticed I've spoken to other charter school leaders, and they'll say things like, well, they said to me, well, Eric, I don't know why you think all these people are going to come because I've done, enrichment programming on the weekend, and the parents often don't come, and the feeling is like, oh, well, they're lazy and they don't care about their kids. And I'm like, well, when is the programming? And they're like, well, it's 9 to 12. And I'm like, well, that's not very helpful because first, the parent maybe brings the kid a half hour in, then they go home, then 2 hours later they're turning around. Like, what if they have a job or other responsibilities, right? Like, you're making things hard for parents who already have things really hard, particularly in an area like the South Bronx, where they're working 2 jobs, they don't have control of their schedule. So if you could make things easier for the parents, you're gonna make things better for the kids because you're more likely to get them to come in. And so that's part of what we're trying to do.
Wow. I mean, I don't even know what to say about it. Working parents spend so much money on childcare. Like, childcare is an affordability, is one of the reasons, the causes of the affordability crisis in New York City. Like, it's so expensive, especially after school childcare. And then I know that many parents work on the weekends. And it's a hardship. It really is a hardship. So having a program where, being part of a school community where you have that kind of support, where you have after school programs and weekend programs, would be a tremendous help to families, and for the kids as well.
Well, obviously, I agree, and that's why we're doing this. And I also want to stress that it's also about the quality, because what I've also seen a lot of schools do is that the regular school staff doesn't want to have anything to do with the after-school program. So what you do is you hire some people for, close to minimum wage, and you bring them in for 3 hours after school. And as a result, the quality of the program isn't good because, first, not a lot of people out there want to work for 3 hours for like something close to the minimum wage, because you got to put food on the table and you're traveling back and forth. Secondly, those people they just like a substitute teacher, they don't have a lot of power because they're not part of the whole school, culture. And so with the after school program becomes a little bit like, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? There's no communication. Kids can misbehave and they know they won't really get in trouble. And then the next thing is that the people who do those programs don't know the kids, don't know the school systems, aren't well trained. And so our difference is that we are hiring teaching assistants. These are people often who sometimes don't have BAs. They often have experience in pre-K or Head Start. We're paying them $60,000 a year, which is a lot more than they're usually currently earning. So we had like hundreds of people apply for these spots. And they do have to work hard. They have to work year round. We ask that they work 50 hours a week for that. But nonetheless, many of these workers actually want those extra hours for extra pay because, they're finding it hard to get ends to meet, and they're working multiple jobs. And we're saying, no, we'll give you one job with a good amount of hours and a decent pay. Those teaching assistants are going to be in the classroom during the school day, beginning around 9:30, and then they're going to stay till 5:36, 6:37, depending upon how many we need to stay a certain amount late. Because keep in mind, you may need more people at 5:30 than at 6:30 when most of the kids have left. But the point is that the kids are going to see after school and on the weekend and during the summer the same educators that they are seeing during the regular school day. Those are going to be trained by us. They're going to get professional development. They're going to be mentored on a daily basis with the lead teacher with whom they work. And so part of that then is ensuring that these optional hours, this enrichment, isn't a low quality afterthought, but it's really baked into the whole program. A lot of parents are what they do is they cobble together things where they have this after school program and this thing on the Saturday, and there's not as much coherence, which is harder for kids because they're dealing with environments which are constantly changing and people who don't know them, et cetera. So that's why we wanted a one-stop shop with all of the pieces functioning together as a whole.
Wow. No, it's quite an impressive program, I must say. And I know it will be welcomed by so many families. And, I've spoken to some parents that I know, and when I tell them about the program, it's like they don't believe me. So that's why I'm so happy that we're doing this interview, because it's like, they're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really. And they're like, no, like, how is it even possible, or it's too good to be true, or how much does it cost?
Oh, yes, I have experienced that. We have to keep on telling people this is free, and they don't necessarily believe it, but it is possible to do. And the magic to it a little bit is economizing in some areas, but it's also just recognizing that, for example, let's take Sunday from like 7 to 10 a.m. I don't expect a lot of kids. I expect, maybe 15 out of our 320 kids, 15 to 20 out of 300 kids may come. Mm-hmm. And so therefore, we only need to hire a few people. I don't need 50 people on site. I need like 3 people for those students, right? Including an administrator, because we have to have some leadership. Mm-hmm. It's not that expensive. And someone would say, well, okay, but Eric, not many parents need that. There's only 15 to 20 kids at your school who are going to be there from 7 to 10 on Sunday morning. But for those 15 to 20 parents, this is a lifesaver, right? Yes. And for some other parent, who may be working, like a 10 to 8 shift at, 10 to 6 shift at Costco, those hours are critical, right? So at a relatively modest cost, we can ensure this flexibility, right? And I'll tell you another thing that I'm very proud of, because I like technology. I have a terrific IT guy who I've been working with, who's straight out of college, Herman Surratt, and we're developing a program where when the parent comes in the afternoon, if they choose to pick up their kids, there's an iPhone app or an Android app, a little bit like, think of it as Google Maps, but for us specifically. They say, I'm coming, okay? They open up the app, it says, I'm coming. The program then calculates when they're going to arrive, keeps track of it. 10 minutes before they arrive, an email is going to go to the teacher where that student, whose student is, is in that class. And then the teacher says to the student, oh, your mom is coming. Get your backpack, get your coat, go downstairs to the entrance and wait. Then the mother is going to show her card, like a little card on the screen, which is going to let the people inside know that she's here. And then, her son is going to basically come right out, with a security camera looking at all this to make sure everybody's safe. And our idea is that instead of having this half-hour ordeal, which is what it often is to pick up your child in New York City public school, mm-hmm. we want the handoff to be 15 seconds. We want, if a parent is driving, for example, for those parents who are driving, our theory is like, you could get out of your car, leave the car running, leave the door open, because it's not going to take so long that you'd want to bother shutting your door. That's what we're going for.
Wow. And you mentioned that, your kids graduated and have moved, gone on to their tertiary education. For my son, he just graduated in June. So, now he's gone. I mean, my daughter, she graduated many, many years ago. So, she's 28 now, he's 18. But like, I don't know if it's jealous, but I really, really wish Strive existed when my children were in school. I mean, this is such a great program. This is going to help so many families. I want to just briefly just talk about like the academic.
Sure.
You know, some schools. So, you know, some schools do like a Montessori approach. Some schools
sure. And I want to answer that. And I want to interject one thing as well, which, by the way, because a lot of parents coming us when they hear about the program, they call us up and say, "Oh, I'm certain I'm too late. Your program is already full because it's so great." We actually do have spots now because we are a brand new program. People are still finding out about us, and we're going to have a very big kindergarten class. We're probably looking at having like 150 kids, so we still have room. If anybody's watching this and looks for or their friend is looking for something. Then to answer your question about academics, so here's what we did, and it's a little bit unusual. So we are going to we kind of have a split approach. I did go to some progressive schools, including Bank Street and a Montessori school growing up, and I thought those were incredibly valuable. However, I do think that for many kids, they also need some structure and to just make sure that they are getting, you know, everything they need in school to perform academically. So we have what I might call a skeleton of the math and ELA curriculum that we're using from Success Academy. We told our authorizer that authorizer charter school, they like that because Success Academy has a proven record of getting, you know, usually 100% of their kids to pass the math and English language exams. Yeah. So that's going to be about 2.5 hours of our day is going to be a more traditional, rigorous, teacher-led instruction. There's a lot of activity. It's not just lecturing, but nonetheless teacher-led. And the rest of the day is going to be what I would call more self-directed activities. So, for example, a lot of reading. There's an academic who's a linguist, and his name will come to me a bit, but out in California. And he did a book and he studied, and he's like, look, if people often talk about what is the most effective way to teach kids vocabulary and writing and how to read well and, you know, and punctuation and spelling. And he says, the thing that study after study has shown that teaches all of those things best is reading. You read, you see spelling, you see punctuations, you see you see grammar. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, there's very few people I've ever encountered in life who were avid readers when they were young, who ended up being like ignorant and stupid. It's very rare, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So what we want to do is for kids to have significant time every day, at least an hour, probably more, in which they are choosing what they want to read. Sometimes we may say it has to be something nonfiction because we want them to learn history. But one kid may want to read about this, you know, the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, because they like wars. Another kid may want, you know, to read about the Underground Railroad. Another kid may want to read about Benjamin Franklin and electricity. Mm-hmm. And what we think is it's particularly this young age, it's more important to develop with kids a love of reading and the habit of reading than to tell them you must read a particular book. Mm-hmm. So there's that self-direction. And then the other part of it is that every classroom is going to have science kits and science books, so the kids can explore science as they choose. They can choose to do one kit or another kit, work with them on their friends, work on them with their friends who also want to do the same kit. So it's these dual pillars of partly the traditional and partly the progressive, which I'm hoping will allow us to get the benefits of a progressive education, which I think really nurture creativity, and independence of thought, while also using some of the more traditional to ensure the kids get the skills and the coverage and the basic, math and English language skills on which, pretty much everything else they will do in science and history, et cetera, is based.
Now it's an impressive program, and that's a pretty large incoming kindergarten class that you'll have. So, Eric, I just to summarize, and for families that are watching this, at the end of the video, we will have a slide with all of the information about Strive, phone number, email, website, so that you can get more information, so that you can follow up, as well as also where Strive is located. And Strive is a charter school, so please keep in mind you can live anywhere in the Bronx and apply.
You can't actually live anywhere in New York, although I think it's better in the Bronx for convenience. Yes. But
yes, that is true. That is 100% true. So,
and also, by the way, what I thought you were going to say, because the other thing people can't believe, because I don't know if we said this, not only is it open all these hours, but it is free. Everything is free. The summer, weekend, and as I said, 3 meals a day.
Yeah, no, it's great. So we are going to have that information, but also, Eric, where is the school located? What is the address?
So we are at 604 East 139th Street in Mott Haven, and that is about a block and a half from the Cypress Avenue stop on the number 6 train. And although I'm sure it'll be on your website, but on your or on your slide, but you can get to us at strivecharterschool.org is our website.
Okay, no, that's great. And also a reminder, parents, there is busing. So that is also another huge deal. I have to say, Strive is, the way it's structured, the school is not just there to support the students, it's there to support the families. And I think that this is something that more families are going to expect from our education system.
Yeah,
and we're setting a very high bar, and parents are going to be demanding, I am certain, more schools like Strive.
Well, I think so. And you actually, I'm glad you raised that point, because I was talking to another charter school leader who I respect, and he said, well, aren't you worried that the parents are just going to use you on the weekend as babysitting? And I was like, I hope they will. I knew what it was like to be a parent, right? I think people are too proud. They're like, leaders are too proud, like, oh, we're a school, we're not a babysitting service. No, you are a baby. You're both. You're a school to educate kids, but you're also there to help out parents. And let's not be too proud or embarrassed to say that we're trying to help people. And frankly, we're open 7 to 7. Now, some people are going to be working at a Costco, right? But let's say there's a couple and they have 2 or 3 kids, and it's been a year since they went on a date, and they say, I'm going to drop my kids off for a few hours so my wife and I can have a date and a little time together, romantically alone. Well, God bless, that's a service too.
It's interesting that you say that. We haven't covered it yet, but we're probably, it'll probably be covered today. We'll assign it to someone. But Mayor Zohran Mamdani, made a whole big announcement yesterday about Parents' Night Out. The city of New York, for the first time in history, is having a new Parents' Night Out program where from 4 to 8, parents can drop their kids off at a location and have a date night. So it's like, I guess it's like a one time a year thing. It's like inaugural. And here you are giving,
we're doing that every night. This is good. I love this. Is going to be our new slogan, Mona. I love this. Every night is date night at Strive. That's the new slogan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, this is, I mean, this is such a great program. When does the school year begin?
So we're going to be open for optional days beginning August 31st. That's to say, parents can bring their kids in that week if they want to, who are registered for the program. Beginning the day after Labor Day is when we start our required school program, and from there on, essentially the fun never stops. We're just going to be open year round with a couple of weeks off per year.
Amazing. Yeah, amazing. This is so great. I think that, like I said, the demand is going to be really great. The expectations for other schools, I kind of feel bad for them in a way, but for families, this is wonderful.
Well, that's the free market,
Yes.
You got to compete, and everyone's always trying to steal your lunch, and you have to step up to the plate and try to compete. So the other charter schools, they're going to need to offer something, and I love that for parents. There's a lot of charter schools and some pretty good ones in the South Bronx. We wouldn't have had a chance of getting all of these kindergartners if we hadn't offered something truly unique, because charter schools, there's more schools and there's fewer parents, so they are competing like anything, and that's the way it should be. It should be the schools competing for students as opposed to the parents desperately searching for a good school.
Yes. And look, you're like, you are really fulfilling what I call one of the original tenets, missions of charter schools, which is to be laboratories for innovation. And believe me, this is pretty innovative. So, Eric, thank you so very much for
my pleasure
for speaking with us today and for engaging our community and families. And again, we're going to have the slide after the interview for you to go on the website, reach out directly to the school, learn more about the school. But Strive is long overdue. So Eric, thank you so very much. Thank you so much for thinking of all of these families and for starting such a wonderful school. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me talk to people.